paper today. You know, worried about the length of time. Huh? I see the look. Right. Thank you very much for being here. Let me apologize for the lack of internet here. It's a GT&T problem. We have this problem almost on a daily basis here with the quality of the internet. Most of you know that the parliament is in recess. I don't think it's a secret in this country. But I recently discovered something that is pretty unusual. I heard that the cabinet is in recess, formally is in recess. Let me just say it to the Guyanese public that in the 23 years of the PBP government, I've never known the cabinet to go into recess. At least, definitely in the over 12 years that I was president. And I was in the cabinet for a significant part of the entire period, and we've never gone into recess. In fact, even leave for ministers, we did not have a fixed schedule for ministers with leave. I said to them in my tenure, you'd have to get that approved every single time you want to go on leave. And we've never had ministers taking like long periods. They would take a week or two, but so there was no fixed leave, although it's provided for, there was no fixed leave for ministers. Now this is a routine thing. So I heard our ministers are abroad doing their medicals now, paid for by taxpayers through an insurance scheme, and they're on vacation, and cabinet is in recess, because parliament is in recess. And whilst all of this is happening, we have a crisis with our teachers and our children. Crisis because this government has refused to negotiate in good faith with the teachers. A crisis because they have been callously misrepresenting the teachers. And rather than sit down and negotiate with them, they have been engaged in a confrontational approach to resolving this issue. I've listened to the Minister of Education, and her entire attitude is condescending, haughty, judgmental. You know, this is all we can do, and if you insist on going on strike, we will make alternative arrangements. Whether those alternative arrangements are provided for by law or not, they're going to do it. And whether the people that they're going to put in place can really take care of our children, that's another issue. But they are going to break the strike. That's all that you get from her. Another one, as you know, saw the teachers as uncaring and selfish. Fortunately, Minister Scott has apologized, I guess, under pressure, public pressure. And why did I say the legitimate demand of the teachers? Notice I did not say at the last press conference I support any percentage. I said that the teachers have been waiting. Their multi-year agreement expired since 2015. They have been in a process of negotiation with this government since 2015 for a new multi-year agreement. They thought they made some progress along the way when earlier this year the president appointed a high-level task force with 9 members from the government side, senior members, the finance secretary, permanent secretaries, a whole range of individuals, to sit with the teachers. They had minutes of those meetings, the task force meetings, submitted to the minister after every session. The minister undoubtedly would have briefed the cabinet. The task force completed its report in March of this year. Now, suddenly, we've heard from the president, even in his press conference, and I'll come to his press conference in a moment, he said, we're not negotiating a multi-year agreement, but the terms of reference all along, for almost 3 years, the discussions with the teachers has been about a multi-year agreement. And the task force he set up talked and negotiated and made recommendations on elements of a multi-year agreement. So the president said, we're not talking about a multi-year agreement here. We're only talking 2018. And so I find it very strange that he will say something of this nature. And so if you don't see this as a breach of a bad faith negotiations, and suddenly the president gave further explanation, then something is wrong if you don't see this as a bad faith negotiations. But the president further said that he is now going to look for some additional resources. So we do hope that we can move forward. Today they have a meeting with the teachers, and we hope that an agreement will be struck, that where the teachers can go back to the classrooms where they belong, teaching our children, and the thousands of parents across this country who are concerned about this issue and their parents being in classrooms, that their fears, their concerns, their worry would be alleviated. I'm very disappointed that the president would say now, after so many months of the report that he has had at his desk and before the cabinet, the task force report, would say now they have problems with the task force recommendations. They put their senior people, and now he discovered in September of this year that they have problems with the task force recommendations. We see this all as negotiation in bad faith. And it's not just the APNU part, it's the AFC. So the AFC has said to the teachers, bear with us. That's their comfort to the teachers. In an article they said, if the teachers get too much, other public servants will be disadvantaged. So they're trying to pit other public servants against the teachers, so that they would not have solidarity from the rest of the public sector. They did the same thing with the sugar workers. They said, if we give sugar workers more money, then there will not be enough money to address the teachers and the public servants. So they want to break any solidarity, industrial solidarity that the teachers may get. Secondly, they said in that same statement, upon taking office, there was not half enough money to do what every Guyanese needed to be done. Yet they found, they recognized that, and they found the 50% increase for themselves. And so their salaries have now gone to close to $1 million a month. So they couldn't find money for what Guyanese wanted. Things were so bad, and therefore they had to do that. And then they continue in the same statement. This is what they said. The AFC therefore appeals to our highly valued teachers to bear with us while we repair the damage done to our economy from 23 years of PPP rule. Under PPP rule, we had 2 multi-year agreements, 5 years agreements with the teachers. We had 2 multi-year agreements with the teachers under PPP rule. Bear with us while we dismantle organized crime and drug trafficking. Deal with trafficking in persons. The smuggling of many ounces of gold overseas every week. Remember we heard that? That how 750,000 ounces of gold was smuggled out of Guyana every year, 15,000 ounces per week. And that will bring in $1 billion US. So now we are still hearing that. There's 3 years in the government. Bear with them while they do that. Bear with us as we plug the holes through which the state's revenue was bleeding. We are making some progress, improving revenue collection in small increments. Now, the tax take has gone from 135 billion to 195 billion, and that's small increments. Now, over a 40% increase on a 2014 base. That's a small increment. This is the sort of excuse. Like, this was what they used to say before the election. And they keep going on with the same sort of lame excuses. And then Nagamoto said that, so, well, as usual, I don't want to waste my time. He said to the same team, oh, Jagdeo was bad as finance minister. I sat as president and negotiated with the teachers directly. And we ended up with an agreement. And secondly, wasn't this the same man who said at whim that he did not, under the PPP, go and look at the clip, that he insisted that he should not take a salary increase until the teachers and the nurses and the public servants got their increase. This is the duplicity from worm-like creatures. I must say that, worm-like creatures, crawling creatures. That's the feeling I get all the time, a slimy feeling every time I talk about this. So let me just say, we support the teachers and their industrial action because of the way they're treated, and the whole country should. They have not looked at the demands themselves. They argued for a big percentage in the first year, but look at what they argued for in the remaining 4 years of the agreement, what they are arguing for. And you would see that by no way that the teachers' request has been unreasonable, but they have been waiting to be heard, to get clear answers from this government for nearly 3 years. And so we support. This is not a political strike, although they tried to make it like that way, Nagamoto and the others, saying if the teachers strike, they would help the PPP. That is, so they must not strike for industrial reasons, for legitimate grievances, because it would help the PPP. By converse, they must take whatever this government does to them. And so it's not political, and as far as I see, the demands are legitimate. The government needs to, if it can't meet all of the demands, it needs to engage. They've been crying out for engagement, the teachers, so far. And the parents should also support the teachers. This is Amerindian Heritage Month, and I want to congratulate all of our indigenous people on a month of celebration of an essential part of our culture. I have to be very careful of what I say now, and I have to pronounce every word. You recall the last time. So I saw the president speaking at the opening of the celebrations. And I'm glad that the government has continued with the celebration of this important part of our culture and the month-long activities that we have to do so. So the president focused heavily on eradicating poverty and eliminating inequalities. That was the theme of his speech. And then it was very flowery as usual. We want to do a whole set of things on education. We want to change your economies, the village economies, etc. And we want to treat indigenous people with dignity, etc. So then I contrast that with what his government is trying to do, to see if they're actually trying to achieve the objective of eliminating inequalities, reducing poverty, and treating people with respect. So, number one, this government is trying to dilute the Amerindian representation on the Indigenous Peoples Commission. We were opposed to that in Parliament, but his government has made a proposal to do that. This president set up a commission of inquiry on Amerindian lands without consulting with any Amerindian NGO or the NTC. The NTC and all the Amerindian NGOs in Guyana said, we're opposed to it. Please do not proceed to appoint the members, Mr. President, because we're opposed to it. We did not see the terms of reference, and it is unnecessary. He went ahead, contrary to their wishes, and appointed the representatives of the COI on Amerindian lands. It was only after intense struggle by everyone in all the NGOs and the PPP that he placed a hold, just a hold, on that issue. But he has not dismantled it as yet, etc. That's the second issue. That's not respect, that's disrespect. Not a single new Amerindian land title has been issued in his tenure, excepting for the ones prepared under the PPP. Not a single new Amerindian land has been titled. That's disrespect. He dismantled the Amerindian land titling unit, and the 10.7 million US we left there, they've spent $3 million of it, but no, nothing. They have slowed down the implementation of our telecommunication program for the hinterland, the computerization program for the hinterland, although we set aside the money in the GRIF. So he had the money to do that. The Amerindian village economies expansion plan that we had a plan for each area, has been stalled. His minister has called Amerindians greedy. Until now, he has not apologized for that. The same Keith Scott apologized recently for what he said about the teachers, because they came on the streets and stuff. But when the NTC asked him to apologize, he refused to do that. And that's documented what he said in a speech. When a young doctor in Barometer pointed out that the health system in that area was in a disaster, they removed him. He got penalized. The president said that in fact, they took away 700 million US dollars of income from the Amerindian community within weeks of getting into office. I've gone through that before, how you came up with 700 million. The nearly 2,000 CSOs were getting $30,000 a month. So when you multiply that by 12 months in the year and by the numbers of CSOs, you get 700 million. They took that away from the village economies, the Amerindian village economies. 2,000 young and not so young Amerindians lost their jobs under them. That's not respect. That's not reducing inequality or poverty. That's disrespect. That's putting more people into poverty. So you can say a lot at make a speech and collect a painting and all of that, and have a ceremony to laud yourself, do a bit of backslapping about how well you're doing. But when you contrast that with the reality of what is happening in the Amerindian communities today, then you see the stark contrast and how the rights are being eroded, Amerindian rights are being eroded, as well as their welfare. And then we have, in addition to this, a bunch of lies being told. So the president in his speech said there are 2,000 small businesses established in these communities as part of his evidence to support that they're making changes in the hinterland. 2,000 small businesses were established, but 2 months ago, you remember Valerie Patterson in a speech, Valerie Lowe, Garrido Lowe, I always make this mistake, Garrido Lowe, in a speech at the conference center, said they had created 1,300 new businesses in the Amerindian communities. Now, I took the 215 communities and divided 1,300 by 215 and got on average about 6 businesses per community. So I did a survey of the Tushaus who came to an activity that I had here. And majority of them had not seen a single new business started in their villages. So this seems to be done on paper. But guess what has happened? That has grown from July to now, September, the 1st of September, it has grown to 2,000 now. The president moved it from 1,300 to 2,000, a growth of 700 new businesses in the area, in the Amerindian community. This is great for the economy if it's true, but I suspect it's false. It's a lie. It would have been great for our economy. And then the president had the gall to speak about improvement of hinterland roads in the same speech on Heritage Day, the 1st of September. Now everyone knows about that. You just need to look at the images of the hinterland roads and you will know how false this is. And part of improving the hinterland could be on teachers in the hinterland and reducing inequalities. They could have done what, as part of the teachers' negotiations, they were asking for better conditions for people who serve our Guyanese people, whether they're from the coast or the interior. Better conditions for those who serve in the hinterland. So I saw this speech as just hollow, very hollow. We are accustomed to those speeches. You go, you celebrate, and I don't want to downplay the celebrations. It's important that we celebrate our culture, but not to be treated with speeches that mean very little for our lives. And we got another one from the president. And that brings me to the president's press conference, the long-awaited press conference. So there had been so much time since the last press conference, so much time had elapsed, that everyone had great expectations, high expectations of this press conference, that we would receive clarity on several issues that the country has been begging for guidance and leadership and direction for a very long time. It's to give clarity about his government's policy than the president. And so the country was waiting, as I said before, with bated breath. They were just all expecting this. So I'll go through a couple of the things, how much clarity we got. In fact, when I go through the issues, you will conclude for yourself. So on the teachers, the president said, we're looking for additional funds. When I spoke with him, I pointed how we could source these funds. Imagine, they're not talking about that. I pointed that out. The one corrupt contract that could satisfy almost the entire demand for the teachers and for their increase in clothing allowance. Nothing. You notice they didn't mention anything about that. But I mentioned to him specifically, I said, terminate that contract, you'll get the money to pay the teachers. I pointed out how in 7 other areas, and areas of dietary and vehicle maintenance and all of these things, local travel, you can raise $5.1 billion. I saw the minister saying they need $4 billion to meet all the teachers' demands. But that's only on those 7 items. I can go through many more. They could raise $5 billion. So he said they're looking for additional funds, so I hope that they hone in on some of the areas that I pointed out. He said this is not a time for a multi-year agreement, contrary to what was happening, the negotiations. So either he is retreating from a promise, or this president has been so aloof, he didn't know that for 3 years what his government has been negotiating and what the terms of reference of his own high-level committee task force were. He talked, when asked about the collective bargaining by one reporter, he said, President said, I've been in touch with GPSU. Not about the principle, which they argued for in the pre-election period, but he said, I've been in touch with GPSU. So that is the clarity we got on collective bargaining. He's been in touch with GPSU. On campaign finance reform, power sharing reform of the Elections Commission, the president said, he was asked about whether these issues could be put on the agenda for reform. And he said that the points that were raised with the leader of the opposition were mutually agreed. The 3 issues that the president put on the table were never mutually agreed. Those were 3 issues that the president said. When I confronted him and I said, is it true that you want to have this discussion? Because we've been told that we are the reticent party. And he said, yes. And I said, could you tell me what are the issues that you want discussed? And he named those 3 issues: the oil and gas, environmental sector, and crime. 3 sectors. They were not mutually agreed. So when I met the president at the subsequent meeting when we were consulting with on the appointment of the commissioner and 4 deputy commissioners, I raised this issue with him, and I said, as I indicated, I do not want the press to think that we are delaying the talks. You had promised to write us indicating what you want to speak of, that you're prepared to engage in discussions and what you want to talk about. So we are expecting a correspondence from you. And I said to him further, we have had discussions at the level of our executive, and once we receive the formal letter from you, I will respond to you, and I would like to add some issues to the agenda. Not that these three were mutually agreed to. In fact, the president proposed those, and I said I would like to add issues to the agenda. And so that was the president about that. On power sharing, too late. And the president said too late. Now, let me make it clear. We have never requested power sharing. Because some people thought we did. So the president said it's too late. And this is what he said exactly. Soon after we got into office, there was a proposal that we should meet to discuss what I call inclusionary democracy. But there is no proposal on the table for power sharing, whatever that means. Now, I think the president is quite clear. He never offered power sharing, and we are not meeting to discuss that. So I was surprised to see, maybe I shouldn't be surprised, when Newsroom, which is from the E-Networks group, suddenly included, and this is becoming a pattern now of fake news, included that there was a proposal at the beginning to the People's Progressive Party for power sharing. That is what the president said at his press conference. And they said that in the early period, you can go and check their report, that there was a proposal to the PPP. So that creates a ton of confusion in people's minds. But this is what the president said himself. And somehow they want to create the impression over there that, again, we were the reticent party, we were, being capricious, etc. So, and this is really becoming a pattern. The president said he wants this to be about an idea sharing proposal, not a power sharing proposal. So we must meet to share ideas. So I just want to make it clear to people out there who've been talking about power sharing and somehow that the PPP is holding this up and that it's good for Guyana. I've heard some civil society types say that, and that we seem to be the stumbling block to this idea, and that look how the government, they read some of those reports from the media. I want them to understand clearly, go to what the president himself said at the press conference. This is the clearest thing about his press conference. Everything else was, we were not clear about policy positions. You're very clear on this one. So, on campaign finance legislation, the president said, I've not seen a draft myself. That's his direct quote. But there is no draft. People are asking now, are you prepared to do campaign finance legislation? So he has not seen a draft himself. Is he committing to it or not? At Babujan, when I spoke, I said the PPP is prepared to have discussions on campaign finance legislation. That's a clear position. He has not seen a draft. He said the Cartel Center has, basically the cartel model has outlived its usefulness, and that we can use other constitutional bodies as a model. Well, let me make it clear on this point, that if we use other constitutional bodies as the model, and the way they're being treated by this government, the constitutional bodies, then we're in big trouble. And the PPP will never agree to, with Granger there, and given his track record of how he has treated constitutional bodies, usurping their functions, giving them directions, bullying them, threatening, have his officers threaten their lives, call in person from the head of the Public Service Commission and say, we don't want blood on our carpet, you better resign. That is the kind of thing. The Attorney General standing up in court and saying he will drop a judge. That means basically kill a judge. This is, and with the president justifying all of this, this is how constitutional bodies have been talking. The Attorney General himself saying he basically guided the DPP in withdrawing the charges, the private criminal charges against the ministers that we had filed, 5 private criminal charges. She null-prossed them, withdrew them. And saying that in the cause of good governance, she was doing so, although this is corruption. We were filing private criminal charges for corruption. So that's what we're going to evolve to. When President Carter came here, we had a situation where the voters list was in trouble. 2, that the counting at the place of poll was an issue for a long time because moving the ballot boxes to central places facilitated the rigging, and everybody knew that. That was the demand of the entire Guyana. And then a fair, independent elections commission, because we did have an elections commission that was constitutional before, but we had rigging of the elections because the executive loomed large over there in the presence of that body. So the idea was to have a credible voters list, to count at the place of poll, those were achieved, and then a model that emphasized fairness. 3 from the government, 3 from the opposition, and the chairperson shall come from a list that the opposition leader submits to the president. So both parties have to collaborate in appointing the president. So both sides have some level of comfort that their interests would be taken care of. That was the model there. The president came and that model was in place for 20-something years. And both sides, the PNC and the PPP, agreed to it. We followed it. Several chairpersons were recommended and appointed. And we had elections. And it was not the model that caused the problems. It was their refusal to accept the results so many occasions. It's not the model at GCOM that caused the problems, the post-election violence. The post-election violence was caused by APNU's refusal to accept the results, although there was a 30,000 difference between our votes and theirs, and although it was certified by the Carter Center, the OAS, the Commonwealth, the European Union, CARICOM, the results were certified, they refused to accept that and took to the streets. That was where the problem is. It's not the model so much at GCOM. And so, look at the contrast. We had issues. Until now, we can't get our court case heard, which is in itself an indictment of this judiciary and those who now run the judiciary. Because an election petition must be heard urgently, continuously. Look at what has happened in so many countries in Africa. Within a month, 3 weeks, the courts get together, they hear the petition, and they make a ruling so we can move forward. In this case, 3.5 years, we're on 3.5 years, and we're no closer to getting it heard. And so that in itself, that could be a problem too, but there was just 4,500 votes separating us, and we accepted the results. So it is, you didn't have that violence and all of that in the post-election period. So it's not that model. Now, having said that, are we still open to talk about it? Definitely, conduct of elections should be something that we should put on the table in the discussion with President Granger. So, for example, maybe we should just contract this out. Contract it out. Get the United Nations, because I think we can do it for cheaper with the sums of money that they spend at GCOM now, and some of it going for all sorts of things. That we could hold our elections, credible elections, with just oversight from Guyanese, cheaper than if we contract it out to an international body that all the parties agree to. So maybe a heavy presence, not in the architecture, but in the machinery, so that all parties would agree that you have a credible list, and you have a couple of international people. We're using them all around the world. Maybe that could be a model. I'm not saying we want that. I'm just saying we need to discuss these things. Because if the conduct of elections and free and fair elections has always been a worry of the people of this country, we have to give them assurances that from both, that the two interested parties, government and opposition, don't in their fight, don't overshadow the need of the people, their right to free and fair and credible and well-organized elections. And so we should put it on the table. So that's just one model that could be explored. There could be other models, including eventually evolving to more of a technical type of commission. We'll put it on the table, but right now, there is no other model in the game except in what is in our Constitution. And President Granger has to respect that, and he has disrespected that. He's changed all of it. He's acted illegally. He's changed from 25 years of practice and acted unconstitutionally. So that is the only game in town now. That is what is in our Constitution. We can have discussions, and I definitely put elections and the conduct of elections on the table in our discussion, because too many Guyanese fear that APNU will try to rig the elections. So that was it. On brooms, so that's at the Carter Center. Yes. On brooms, the president said, and I quote him directly, that there was no crime and the police did not feel there were grounds for any prosecution. So he's clear about that, although at the beginning he said they were still awaiting the police report. And then he concluded by saying there was no crime, the police did not feel there were grounds for any prosecution. But we have seen and we have had revealed evidence of brooms trying with a number of other well-known characters, trying to alter what really took place there, compromising people. And I'm sure that all of you have had this shared to you on Facebook. And if you have not had that, I let some people share it to you, the reporters, and you can hear the conversations, the taped conversations about how they're trying to alter the course of justice. The police should pick up that. And what was important, the guy said, I have a different tape, I'll send it only to you. Somebody in the tape said, Minister, that tape, I believe, is the one that really revealed whether a gun was drawn or not. But let's forget that. So it's gone. And we move on to bigger things. But this is what the president said. It may be, when pressed, a breach of the code of conduct. But this could be dealt with in the political party to which she belongs. I thought this was a code of conduct for ministers. So, what is he saying? They made a big hype about a code of conduct for ministers and how Nagamutu cut the ribbon on that too. You know, he cut a ribbon there and he had 2 weeks to get his face in the papers on that code of conduct for ministers. And now the president is saying, there may have been, but that could be dealt with in the political party to which she belongs. So is there a code of conduct for ministers or not? Because that's a party code of conduct. What about his much vaunted code of conduct for ministers? And then we're not any closer to the Ramnarayan explanation. He said, oh, one time I thought they made the decision, so he said the police service commission made the decision. Not that I hold any brief for anyone, but I think we're no closer to finding out, and we'll never find out what really went on. So finally, we get the president to say that they agreed to this removal. This was another one too, like pressured, so small amounts of marijuana. A position we had taken for years now, and he said they're so busy with legislative agenda of the government, so unusually busy, that they couldn't get this to the agenda, on the agenda. It takes like 30 seconds to just delete that part. They have to go with a tiny amendment which deletes one line or two lines in the act. And this government has been so overwhelmed that they couldn't get this in 2 years when they had a paper, an issue on the agenda brought by one of the backbenchers. They couldn't address it. 2 years it took to get from the president that this is going to be addressed when we come out of recess. I've received a copy of the Combs report, and he said that they will discuss this soon. I don't know if this was sent to me. I'd have to clarify this in confidence or not, because I'm inclined to share it with everyone, because anything that comes here, I believe, is a public document, but I don't want him to think that I'm sharing every public document that comes to me. So maybe he stopped sending me the few that he sends now. So then the 50%. The president said he has no regrets for the 50%. I want Guyanese to hear this, that no regrets for the 50% increase that the ministers took. No regrets. When asked about whether he should have fought for a tougher contract with Exxon, the president expressed no contrition. He said, given the circumstances at the time, I think the government did what was in the realm of possibilities. They did the best that could have been done. Now, this is sad. Really, really sad. The president, who defined the realm of possibilities for the president? And now he says, to all the questions on oil and gas, including the audit of the pre-contract costs that was asked of him, he then said they're building capacity at GRA. That was the whole tenure. Then when pressed about it by the reporters, he then said, oh, I have a new energy department, talking only about the future, as though our future starts now in the oil and gas, not with the contract. And he says, I'm building capacity and I shall receive a full report on all of these matters in October. Now the president will get a report from his Department of Energy about all of these matters, the contracts, pre-contract costs, etc., in October of this year. Next month he's going to get that. What has he been doing for 3.5 years? What has this president been doing for 3.5 years? And he said this is the best they could have done. That I beg to disagree. We urge them to get technical people in the ministry. We urge them to get technical people to come in and address this matter in the negotiations. They refuse. This is not the best we could have gotten. And this is the low bar that our president sets. So then he said that the future development, that he was asked whether that about future development now that they have these big finds of oil, and the president said it's not a matter for Exxon. This is a sovereign responsibility of the government of Guyana. The government of Guyana will determine the pace of oil field development. Now, did the president read the contract? He has no say in this practically. And this is what he says. It's not a matter for Exxon. This is a sovereign responsibility of the government of Guyana. That he will determine, his cabinet will determine the pace of oil field development. This is it. The whole country thought the president will bring clarity. He is the one, the chief policy maker. We elect him to chair the cabinet, would bring clarity. He has put them in an even worse position with the explanations. That now we are now well served. Are you satisfied with the pace the economy is growing? This is what the president said. I would like the economy to grow at a faster pace. We all would. The growth of the economy has been impeded by a lack of energy and the underdevelopment of the manufacturing sector. Now, who killed the hydro? Who killed the hydro? It's not being replaced by anything else. So at the conference, sugar conference, I heard the SPU saying they did a feasibility study and power from the cogeneration will be 13 cents per kilowatt hour thereabouts versus 16 cents per kilowatt hour from gas. Now, the one for gas, as far as I know, the only study the government did was a desktop study. But assuming these numbers are true, they killed the Amila Fall, which was going to be 10 cents per kilowatt hour, claiming that it's too costly, but they're going ahead with an investment, and now this government is borrowing to make an investment that will generate power 13 cents per kilowatt hour. When with Amila Fall, we just be buying the power. We will not saddle the country with debt at a cheaper rate. And the oil and gas will come in at 16 cents per kilowatt hour. That's what we heard at the conference. And then the gentleman said, this will power the sugar industry or the power development in Guyana. But outside of that, that's just futuristic. This president is saying, no, the lack of energy is affecting our economy. And now he's now made a single major investment in power since he took office. Although they killed Amila, that would have come in. So we have a spate of blackouts. And then the manufacturing sector, you're killing it by the taxes, the new taxes. Now there's even a tax on export because you can't reclaim input VAT for your exports. There's a tax. That's a big issue now between GRA and the manufacturers. You're killing exports. I can go through a long list of things that are really affecting manufacturing and the growth of the economy here. And then the president goes on to say, Fortunately, we have seen an increase in investment. What increase? No increase. You've had no major investment since you took office, Mr. President. And the only game in town is ExxonMobil, and that they embrace it so warmly, but that investment came under the PPP. So again, out at sea in his explanation. The president is out at sea, somewhere lost in the stratosphere. And so what percentage of the Starbuck block explored? He said, I'll ask for a thorough briefing in October. He'll ask for a thorough briefing in October. I can go on. Social cohesion, no clearer. The president said for social cohesion is not a device for one ethnic group. And then how he's bringing it, we've celebrated Portuguese Day, Chinese Day, Indian Arrival Day, and Emancipation Day. That's his evidence of social cohesion, nothing. He didn't say much. He said he did not intend to berate young Afro-Guyanese, but he did. It was saying to them they're lazy if they don't have a job. There is no job out there for many people now. And if they didn't have a job before under the PP, it's worse now. And they can't be lazy now. Suddenly become lazy because you're in power. And they're not lazy, they're looking for opportunities. And when they do go and they own a cell phone, it's out of necessity, or they go and take a drink on the weekend, it's from their money. It's not the government's money. But he did it. So now I suspect a retreat. The president said, I was intrigued. I think everybody was shocked that he said the presidency is so burdensome to host the press conferences. I think that's a shocking thing. The president then said a bit about the Land Sales Commission. And Gaisuko again, he was not very clear. He didn't address the 7,000 workers who were laid off and their severance. So Herman, we've been asking this question. I asked it of the SPU at the press conference. SPU said that's not their business. So they took the assets of Gaisuko, their foreclosed companies. They took 100% of the shares. They raised $30 billion. And they said, the severance business is not ours. That's the government's business. I asked the president. He said a decision has been made. Harman came to the press conference, to the conference. I saw the Chronicle had him as saying this will be done, or DPI. They're both the same. Before the end of the year, the severance would be paid. I didn't hear him, and I don't think I'm like deaf or anything at the press conference when he spoke there, because I was trying to get specific answers from them when they intend to pay the severance. And we got no answers there. The president has not given answers, so he's in now breach of the law. The Wales sugar workers, I don't know, many of them never got their severance, and the others too. Then he spoke about the green paper, and I saw again from the sugar conference, the Chronicle or DPI saying that the green paper came out of consultations. I had to address that issue at the sugar conference. This green paper came out of no consultation. In fact, we've been trying to have the green paper debated in the parliament. They have refused steadfastly to do so. We've the Economic Services Committee of the parliament made that request. They've refused the green paper. He said he's met with Gau. That was not a negotiation. He met and told them what was there. So he said they're going to keep 10,000 workers. But 10,000 workers produce 150,000 tons of sugar. Would that be feasible? Would that be feasible? But let me make it clear. SPU came there at the sugar conference. Minister Harman came. We don't know about the plan. The president told me, Ministry of Agriculture in charge. I asked the head of the SPU, I said, you have outlined 3 elements of a plan. Where was this plan approved? He said by some old board some time back. I said, but the president just said that you have no responsibility. So what if there is a new board now in place and the board does not agree with your plan? He didn't have an answer to that. That's one. I asked, so we are in big trouble. I asked, would you make available the plan to us? No. Imagine they have not given the sugar industry the plan for the future viability of sugar, nor have they shared it with anyone else. Contrast that with the pre-2015 period when all these plans were laid before the Economic Services Group of the Parliament, Committee of the Parliament. So we don't know, we're going to spend $15 billion on it. The SPU said, the world has changed, so we decide we're going to go with cogen. So we'll have a shorter lead time. When I ask, why borrow the money now? Why not phase the borrowing? Because you're paying interest. No clear answer to that too. At the land sale, I said they said they're moving to privatize. I asked whether we'll get a copy of the Pricewaterhouse study. It will be shared with the country. We didn't get it. He said that will have to go up to the bigger people. Can't make a decision on that, yet they're proceeding to privatize. So I said, but the president said that there's a land sales commission. So the head of SPU said that some lands would be ring fenced. Only extra lands would go to the land sales commission. But I don't know whether the president shares that same view. What SPU just said. And they plan not to sell land. That is what the head of SPU said. We're not selling those lands. So now I saw the government clarifying. They've had about 10 clarifications about the president's press conference and what he actually said. Issue something to say. He never said they're not selling land. So it is, we're not any clearer. I can go on. These are just a couple of the things where I thought we would at least have clarity from the president. And so the last one is whether the president will be the candidate again. And can you imagine, well, the president said, I'll do whatever people want, his party wants. And that's a fair answer for a politician. But guess what we've had? We've had Raphael Trotman, who is the leader of another party, whose party has not decided whether they will be in a coalition. That's at least what they say publicly with APNU in the 2020 elections. They have to make a decision. He supports the president to run for another term. But his party has not decided whether they will be together or who will be their presidential candidate. So if he supports Granger and his party runs separately and have another candidate, he'll have a hard time. But this is, this is the psychophancy we see. The psychophancy. And guess who too? Mr. Hines. After this public spat with the president, I think he's worried about his well-being. And so he, from the WPA now, the WPA, he made it clear we have not made a decision whether we will be part of this coalition, what we'll do in the future. But he too supports Granger for another term. So it's psychophancy at its worst. That's what we see. Thank you.
Lieutenant Samuel from the newsroom, you spoke about inclusionary governance. I just wanted to point out to you that in June 2015, Minister Harman said he wrote a letter to then General Secretary Clement Crowley outlining a preliminary framework for inclusionary governance, and the Philippines never responded. So given that, could you say now what are your thoughts on the notion of inclusionary governance and if the party would be willing to partake in such a structure?
Well, I'm glad inclusionary governance can never be power sharing. And let me read what the president says, how he defines inclusionary governance. And I hope that the newsroom and the others will stick with this definition too. Soon after we got into office, there was a proposal that we should meet to discuss what I call inclusionary democracy. But there is no proposal on the table for power sharing, whatever that means. So it's clear. In the president's view, sharing ideas is his way of, that's what he made it clear. An idea sharing type of discussion is part of inclusionary governance. In our definition of inclusionary governance, if you look at what, there was a paper that I presented at the White House, the State House, which was white at that time. No, so, right, it was white at that time, yes. So we presented a paper there, and it was working towards inclusive governance. And that was the title of the paper. And I pointed out how building trust was essential to eventually maybe executive power sharing. And we spoke about reforms and the building of trust, how we operate in relation to constitutional bodies, and the changes that we have made in the Constitution to allow a more inclusionary form of governance through the reforms. For example, the 4 standing committees, the 5 Rights Commission, the PPC, the Parliamentary Management Group, having a greater parliamentary input into the public service, teaching service, police service, and judicial service commissions. These are all changes we made in our Constitution to give the party that may not be in power a greater voice in national affairs. But that is only when you have the party in power allowing that to happen. In this case, now, for the first time in the history of Guyana since independence, and maybe even before, we have a minister on the Public Accounts Committee, which is unheard of anywhere in the Commonwealth. A minister sits on the Public Accounts Committee. That minister is Valda Lawrence. And she's been the subject of several investigations herself. Nowhere in the world. On the standing committees, you now have ministerial input. Your ministers sit on some of the standing things. So one on natural resources, I think, has 3 ministers. Under the PPP, we took the ministers, there was no ministerial presence there. It was staffed by other MPs, so ministers had to go and report, appear before these committees. That was what we meant. This is where you build trust. Now, what President Granger did with the GCOM matter broke trust. How can you trust someone who acts in the face of such a flagrant violation of history and constitution and public opinion, acts because he thinks that his interpretation prevails? And the president, just to give you an idea of his mindset, the president said, I've directed my ministers to respect the decisions of the court. He has to direct his ministers to respect the decisions of the court. I thought that was normal, that once a court rule, they adjudicate, you have to respect it. He believes he has a say in how they should treat those court decisions too. So that is what we meant. And clearly, the president has defined it himself, what inclusionary democracy is. Yeah, please.
Just 3 quick questions. Minister Jagdeo Sharma said that he's willing to give up his seat with a day's notice, and he named who he would give his seat to.
Okay.
Or what's your take on that, number one? Number two,
I think it's Irfan, not orphan.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Ali,
Ali,
what's,
yeah.
what's your take on that? Number two, if the president was to acquiesce to that kind of policy and inclusionary governance, would you accept the position? And number three, would you commit that should the PP get back into power, that they would approach governance with shared governance, that inclusionary?
I definitely inclusionary governance, and I said it at Babujan. The way I see it forward is that Guyana can move faster if you have some form of arrangement where all the parties can be involved. I can't define a specific mode, but I believe in that. I believe that it's a time forward. That's why this government needed probably its own time to come to that realization. And so go back to my Babujan speech. I spoke about this the last time clearly, and to thousands of our supporters about how we will approach governance in the post-election period. And so that's one. I don't think Jaipal Sharma could really determine that for the president. And Jaipal Sharma, I think, is trying to create a little niche for his party, for the future. So he's trying to seek independent, maybe as we approach elections, you'd see more of that, people who are from the small parties, trying to differentiate themselves. It is the same Jaipal Sharma who has been one of the most partisan ones. I told you about the last time. The president himself said that the AG's office is not a prosecuting agency. Yet in his government, they budgeted $100 million for special prosecutors to prosecute PPP people in the Attorney General's budget, not the DPP. And the president said at the last press conference, the Attorney General's office is not to deal with prosecutions. That's a DPP. But they put the money here. And Jaipal Sharma and the others have been at the forefront of advocacy to unfairly target people. Look at the Westford issue. Look at the Westford. He had been advocating it, ministerial pressure to reopen, appeal the case. So
He said he's speaking as a citizen and not as a member of parliament.
if Jagdeo says something as a citizen, most of you will attribute it to a PPP position.
He said when you were the president, you said his father was guilty.
Huh?
When you were president, you said his father, C.N. Sharma, was guilty of the charge. He said that you said
Because,
that.
and
He said, you also said Premanik Chan in parliament said his father was his father. So he said, how can you now say a minister can't say?
I don't want to speak about my personal involvement with the matter because the people sought help. And if you ask the former Chancellor of the Judiciary, Desiree Bernard, what I appointed, Desiree Bernard was involved with I shouldn't say much about this, but a traumatized child. And that's all I'm going to say. Because it is something that I detest, I abhor. And if you notice, let me tell you until now, that I've not appeared on that station for that same reason. Although an offer was made to us. Other MPs have gone there. But for the same reason, I believe strongly about it. But that's history because this country sometimes, they chose politics above our children. That is what? Like the Valda Lawrence case. Like when Valda Lawrence, the same thing happened in that era. When they all knew from the political opposition what the truth was, yet they chose politics ahead of welfare for the kids. So I don't want to go back to that now. That's a history that until now bothers me, because I know we failed a lot of our children at that time. And so let me end it there.
Yeah, Mr. Jagdeo, the government has signaled intention to sign an MOU with Trinidad and Tobago. Have you seen the contents of that MOU? Are you invited to partake or any knowledge whatsoever? And what impact you think this will have? Because I'm thinking, from what all we've heard, is that this will invite Trinidad companies to come in. The private sector has already said their concern. What are the implications to the local private sector, do you believe?
Given our experience with the secrecy surrounding the negotiation of the contract, and then the result that we saw, our suspicions as a country are aroused, and they're at a heightened level. And so it's not unreasonable for people to think the worst of anything that smacks, any agreement that smacks of secrecy. We had signed an agreement with Ansa McCall years ago under the PPP to study the area in the East Kanji Reservoir, that entire area, large tract of land in the Kanji Basin, to see if they could do cane expansion for ethanol and other purposes. That was through Go Invest, the MOU. For 5 years, Kite News had me as a secret MOU with Ansa McCall. It was just an MOU to do a study to see if it was feasible to do that. And 5 years I had that label. This one is even worse, and so I hope it's treated. I'm just saying equity of treatment now. That's what I'm making the case for. Equity of treatment. Eventually, Ansa McCall did the studies, and they found that it wasn't, I don't think it was feasible at that time, and so he moved on. And so the same thing here is that when you hear all of this, our suspicions are heightened. And we hear about Petrotrin. We hear statements coming out from the politicians in Trinidad and Tobago. Statements that want to link Trinidad and Guyana and our prosperity growing together as a region. I do not have a problem as a person who is a strong advocate for CARICOM unity and us working together and enjoying shared prosperity with linking our fortunes. I don't have a problem with that. So I support that rhetoric about us doing more things together, regional integration, etc. But when I hear people hear about sharing our prosperity now, things like that, those kinds of statements, the MOU, the framework through which that will happen, they somehow believe that they're going to be excluded from opportunities. They're going to be excluded from opportunities. And in this all, now the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago himself pointed out how limited those opportunities will be, unlike in Trinidad's case where the oil comes onshore. How limited they will be because the oil would be pumped from the platform straight into the vessels and would leave. So you don't have backward integration into the economy. We've seen that person on the Al Jazeera program. And by the way, somebody told me, did I mention this before? That Imran Khan had two persons close to him in that area when he was doing that program. And Al Jazeera innocently thought that the comments that they were getting were from Guyanese, and the two AFC persons who were with him, of the 3 or 4 questions that Al Jazeera posted as coming from Guyanese, they thought Guyanese had joined the light feed, were from those individuals. That should be investigated, and Al Jazeera should know about it, and it's an ethic thing. It's unethical. It's unethical. But let me come back to the key issue here. So I believe that, let me go back to what I was saying. I believe that this MOU should be made public. I believe that we should work with Trinidad and Tobago. They have some expertise. But I believe that there must be, in a situation where limited opportunities are going to come on shore, then the hog share of those opportunities must go to Guyanese. That is my view on it, the hog share, because it's our oil too.
Well, Mr. Jagdeo, what are your views on the length of time it takes government to get this local content policy in place?
I don't, like everything else. The president will get a briefing about that next month. And then when you meet him again, he'll need another briefing for that one too.
I mean, off the question is, this question, I want to follow up on an important question. Yesterday, the GCCI had a press conference, and the president did that in Darwin. He expressed concern that Guyanese at present aren't given opportunities, and that with this that is coming out, and for the push Guyanese out of it. And I think one of his vice presidents, expressed concern that yes, it's all good, well and good that we want to share with the Trinidadians, but our politicians should ensure that it is reciprocated, because they are businessmen and they know that there are many instances where they send, I think up to recently, a shipment of coconut water was not allowed, and he made several references. In your meetings with the president to come, would you somehow put forward recommendations on how, or do you even have recommendations on how these concerns can be handled efficiently, and how you can actually secure a niche for Guyanese without them being experts and without them having the required skills at this point?
As I said before, it's my belief that our people should be the primary beneficiaries of the development of this sector. That when I say our people, I mean Guyanese. But we're part of CARICOM. We share a trade agreement with CARICOM. We share history with CARICOM. We share culture with CARICOM. A lot of our people move back and forth. And Trinidad and Tobago has expertise. So whilst we ensure that the bulk of the benefits come to our people, we also have regional obligations to reach out. It can be to our mutual benefit. But yes, there has to be reciprocity. And so one example was given, but I can give you 15 examples of how phytosanitary restrictions were used to harm our products going to many CARICOM countries. And so we have to get justice for our people too in regional trade. In regional trade, we have to ensure that, one, that happens, and secondly, we've always argued that the CSME has several components. It's free movement of goods, services, capital, but also people. And some CARICOM countries want to emphasize only the first three. And when it comes to people, we have had huge problems with our people being treated with dignity and respect. They can't break the laws of those countries. They have to comply with the laws. Those countries have a right to enforce their laws, but we ask that our people be treated with decency and respect. And we have had big fights with countries over that. And so we have to fight for Guyanese too. We have to fight our government and everyone here. We have to fight for a space, and we have to get more prosperous ourselves in the future. It's not going to happen in the short term. So a lot of people think, oh, from next week or so, or 2 years down the line, they'll be getting big bags of money. It's not so. It's going to happen if we manage things well. It's going to start happening around 2024 or so, that period. That we got to manage well and set the basis for that. So whilst we do that, we must also share our prosperity with others. And there are thousands of Guyanese who live abroad, who was a big pool to come back here. The way I see it, in the next 10 years or so, this will be the place to be if we manage well.
Okay, sir, two other questions. First, now about the office of the DPP. That's one question. Two, campaign finance and legislation. You said that at Bobby John you committed to having this in place, but there's a new thing in Guyana. Everything the DPP says, they want to know why you didn't do it when you were in office.
Yeah.
So,
But look at several things. I think the urgency of it is because of the oil and gas. The big find now, the oil and gas, and I think there's a big fear. Nigel Hughes expressed that fear himself, that the ability to fund or to direct, steer whole parties. A single company can finance an entire party. And that is why there is a greater urgency, not only for that campaign finance legislation, but also for information on receipts from oil companies being made public. And I've said earlier that I'm hoping to get legislation drafted, so we will push that even when the parliament reopens, to ensure that every cent we collect from any oil company will be advertised in the official gazette. We'll all know about it and report it to the parliament. Every cent. And barring, if that doesn't happen, you'd have stiff jail penalties for the people who receive money and don't make it known. How the government spends it is another matter, but just that the public has a right to know. It's a right to know. And so those are the two things that are very urgent now in light of our major finds offshore. And what was the DPP? Yes, I do have concerns about the independence of the office. I've never seen a statement from the DPP refuting what Bagil Williams said. I've never seen a statement from the DPP's office refuting it.
So, how is the DPP intending to deal with this, knowing that the government wants to put forward a number of charges, and many of these will have to be approved by or recommended by the DPP? Is this not a major concern?
It is a major concern.
What are you concerned?
I'm not sure. We can't, that's a constitutional post. You can't remove the person, you can't fire the person. We don't have that authority. And
Basically, your hands are tied.
our hands are tied, yes. But why not ask the DPP office directly about how they have acted? What was the good governance reason that was put in the letter when they null press the charges, that will prevent or that would cause a breach of good governance if we expose a corrupt minister. How could that breach good governance in the country? Our charge was to expose corrupt activities. We had to prove those in court. And the charges were withdrawn because it's against good governance. It's perverted.
Mr. Jagdeo,
Yes.
the president has said he wants to meet with you in September this month. What are the areas that you want to see placed on the table, and will you participate in those talks if the Prime Minister is at the table with the president?
Yes, the president can bring whoever he wants. Once the president is there and he committed that he would lead the talks, then he has the authority to make decisions. But so he could walk with 4 rubber stamps, it's not a problem with me. He could walk with 4.
What are the
yes.
areas? What are the areas you want to discuss at the meeting? What are the areas?
I mentioned one because the president has spoken about this himself. So that is one area. I would like you to wait until you see my letter. I promise when I send a letter to him outlining the areas that we want to talk about, you will get a copy of it. But since he's brought this issue up, elections and the issue of, campaign financing will be on the agenda now, since the president said he wants to discuss this, he has no problem with this. 2, GCOM. Those are at least 2 areas, and the conduct of free and fair elections in Guyana. Well, no, apart from the 3. Apart from the 3, and then the gerrymandering issue continues. So, anyhow, thank you.